Good afternoon, Scott here, known as Cantaloupe to some online, and I'm bringing a video to you on a subject that's interesting to me. It might be of interest to you or someone you know, and I want to review statutory rape laws and their spirit, their history, their precedent, the idea of what they're good for, and how to use them properly, if you ask me. So I have never been accused of statutory rape. I want to go on record here. I have no direct experience, but I'm very familiar with the concept. I'm familiar with protecting children. I'm familiar with the idea of rape, and I want to talk about these ideas among some other connected ones in just a few minutes. Statutory rape requires first that I describe what I mean by a crime in general. What is a crime that I'm referring to? A crime is that which occurs outside of an agreement, outside of valid consent, and does damage to somebody. And it can be as simple as attempting to do something criminal, which also does damage because somebody is made uncomfortable or threatened, or their safety or their security is threatened in some way, and it sets a bad example. So it's possible to charge people with crimes before they've happened, but generally speaking, something must have actually happened in order for a crime to be for a charge to be pressed. They call them pressing charges when people are accused of something officially and legally. So rape is pretty clear. I don't think it needs a lot of explanation. People are already familiar with the idea of non-consensual sex, that is, sex over objection, or sex that is lacking the opportunity to consent properly. So there's different kinds of lacking the opportunity, right? There's being intoxicated or unconscious, being in a coma, being underage, or being overage. Turns out you can rape the elderly. There's something called elderly abuse, and it's not meant to be funny. This isn't a joke. So it's very serious. Rape is a very serious subject because when somebody experiences that, it causes a lifetime of trauma. It causes deep, deep trauma, and they require a great deal of care and therapy if they can ever even recover from it. It's very serious. So anyway, I don't mean to be light about the subject. So I also want to be clear about something else that's going on that's very connected to this idea that in America, especially in California, we have gotten wildly off the rails with the misunderstanding that a crime is that which a symbol, a legal symbol, happens to fit. One or more symbols happens to fit it, and all of a sudden we start calling it a crime, regardless of circumstances, regardless of consent, regardless of who's involved, how old they are, whether or not there was damage, whether or not there was even a problem. We're just looking at this point, apparently, for symbolic fit, which creates a huge amount of confusion because it makes no sense. Let me explain this for a second. You can sum up this mistake of trying to fit a symbol, a legal paragraph, a legal description to a behavior. You can sum up the mistake by showing that good behavior fits those same symbols. For every law as a symbol, when it's rolled out prematurely, preemptively, as a deterrent, as a preventative measure to keep people honest, so to speak. If you are a law enforcement person or an investigator who sees something suspicious and you arrest somebody on the suspicion that they may have been planning something, or it appeared like they could have done something but it's not substantiated, there has to be something called reasonable doubt that is overcome in order to press charges legally. This is very important. There has to be probable cause to involve yourself in somebody's property or their freedom, their person. There has to be beyond a reasonable doubt to become involved in an official capacity with law enforcement, criminal prosecution, investigation, surveillance, search and seizure, and all that stuff. So just a little bit of background, a little bit of context here. So in the case of rape, back to the subject, statutory rape, there are special protections for people who are underage, and there's a very good reason for it. However, like many laws that people are misunderstanding right now, that is, for example, if you're on private property, is that trespassing? Your knee-jerk reaction is to say, yes, it is. But what if you're just an invited guest? You're saying, well, don't be ridiculous. Okay, I'm going to repeat the question. If you're on private property, are you trespassing? There's not enough information, right? Okay, so are you legal occupant? Are you a resident there? Are you renting a room there? Are you a dinner guest? Are you a party guest? There are a lot of reasonable, consensual examples of when being on someone else's property is 100% legal. and it's not obvious based just on the information I asked. So here's the abuse, here's the confusion and the problem, and this same exact confusion applies to every single law in the books. And we're being told to keep our heads down, don't ask too many questions, don't get in trouble, stay out of trouble, don't get the cops called. But I'm sorry, that's not good enough, because the problem is being abused by everybody, including law enforcement. The problem specifically, one more time, is that people are trying to fit the symbols to the behavior and calling it a crime before there's been any evidence of damage, before there's been any breach of consent. So back to the subject. The subject is statutory rape. Rape as a law, that is sexual assault. It's not usually called rape. I believe some law books still have rape as a simple crime, but it's usually expanded out to be more comprehensive, such as sexual assault or sexual harassment, battery, sexual battery. There's a whole constellation of crimes surrounding the idea of rape, and there's a special segment with emphasis on people who are underage. Obviously, this is common knowledge, but what's not common knowledge is how to properly use these laws. It is ridiculous to expect people under 18 not to date each other. It is equally ridiculous to expect every single person under the age of 18 to wait until they're 18 to date anybody, let alone, people that they're legitimately and consensually interested in who may be above 18. Okay, this should be obvious, and here's the problem. Someone who's over 18 is allowed legally, in a very literal and provable sense, to date whoever, as long as it constitutes a consensual agreement, without damage, with no complaints and no issues. Now, let me explain what statutory rape is, because most people, if you ask them, they will tell you it's simply having sex with someone who's under 18. There's more to it. It turns out that in the courtroom, when rape is prosecuted, pretty much every single time, there's history of this, provable, recorded history of every single court case involving an accusation of rape, there's a he said, she said. This is a very well-known problem. It becomes super difficult to prove. Sometimes the cases drag on, and it becomes a coin flip, unfortunately, because of lack of evidence. Usually there is no evidence. It's just testimony and allegations, hearsay and conjecture. So statutory rape laws were rolled out for one specific purpose: to mitigate the filibustering and the ambiguity that goes on when minors are involved, so as to be able to expedite the cases when necessary. When necessary is key here, to protect them, so that it doesn't become a he said, she said thing that drags on and ends up getting dismissed at the cost of minors getting raped. Okay, because when it's serious, it's very serious. So again, in summary, these statutory rape laws and special sexual assault laws pertaining to minors are so that they can be expedited with special protection for those people without a great deal of preamble, without a great deal of extra investigation. Proof is not required because they have special protection under those laws. However, now there's a big however here. To misunderstand the purpose of these laws being to protect young people, not to block them, not to block people from loving each other consensually, not to block people from normal human behavior that is healthy and productive and allowed by law as well, to block them becomes a criminal trespass on the part of administrators. To block people from doing what they're allowed to do by law, that is to pursue happiness, to be free, to be involved in their own business in this country, is to make a criminal out of the administrators. It's called false prosecution, false arrest, false imprisonment, and I'm quite sure of this. I'm quite sure that there are protections for everybody, including minors. Not just minors, but literally everybody. So it's something to keep in mind. Okay, I'm just under 10 minutes. People are wildly confused. In summary, one last time, a law isn't broken just because it happens to fit something that somebody is doing. A law is broken when something criminal has happened, after which the laws are used to document it, to prosecute it, and to communicate about it, so that we have a reference to what has happened, so that I can tell you what happened. I can describe it. Oh, it looked like a murder. Okay, well, in this country, that doesn't equal a murder. There's going to be some kind of due process. We're guaranteed by law that there's going to be a big investigation, right? So the same is true for every serious crime that you can think of. I'm quite sure. Make sure that people don't tell you that your rights have been suspended. This is where we're at with it. We have a culture right now where rights across the board are being suspended on suspicion alone. You're being told that you can prove your innocence. Where have we heard this before? You are already innocent. I want to go on record with one last idea. You're innocent until proven guilty in this country. You have no burden or obligation to prove your innocence. In the absence of evidence, in the absence of reasonable doubt and probable cause, you have nothing to defend. In the absence of damage outside of a contract, there has been no crime. In the absence of consent, perhaps there has, if there was no consent. So if you love somebody, regardless of their age, especially if they're underage, you better make sure that they're not going to withdraw that consent. You better be 100% sure about what you're doing, and you're doing it properly and for the right reasons. You're allowed to meet people. You're allowed to hang out with people. You're allowed to love people. But if you harm people, that's over the line. If you're a vampire, if you're a sexual predator, if you're into bondage, if you're into twisted sex, there might be no legal way to do that sometimes, especially with young people. That's what those laws are for. Be decent, and there won't be a problem. Reach out if you like with questions or comments to whitehotrobot@gmail.com. Thank you.